Marvel Studios is the undisputed king of cinema, and pretty much has been ever since 2012's Avengers, where it proved that not only can an interconnected movie universe work, it can sell tickets better than pretty much any other franchise model. And even in the wake of Avengers Endgame, which was the big finale to 21 movies of build-up and the second highest grossing film of all time, Marvel doesn't seem like it's going to slow down anytime soon. Black Widow was a success, Shang-Chi seems like it's been a success, and Spider-Man is probably set up to be the highest grossing film of 2021. So who am I to tell you that all of this is going to come to an end? Well, I'm not saying the ship's going down exactly, obviously Marvel's not suddenly going to crash and burn, but I am saying that this era, from 2012 to today, this period of absolute dominance, where Marvel can casually drop multiple films a year featuring previously obscure B-list superheroes, and still effortlessly outgross the best efforts of rival studios, this era is likely going to come to a close sooner than you think. We are still a long way away from people getting tired of this film franchise, but we are definitely headed for an era where its status as number one is going to start slipping fast. So to understand why this is, first of all, what made this franchise so successful in the first place? Why has this franchise that started off as nothing more than a crossover of individual superheroes that most people didn't really care about beforehand, featuring in individual films that aren't really anything special, become the seemingly unbeatable Goliath that it is today? It's three factors: freedom, consistency, and the right thread. So let's break that down. What do I mean by freedom? Well, Marvel movies offer something that no other film franchise really does, which is freedom of choice for the consumer. In most film series, the progression is linear, and so you have to watch the previous films of the series before watching the newest ones. You can't really watch The Rise of Skywalker without watching Force Awakens and The Last Jedi first. You can't watch The Dark Knight Rises without watching The Dark Knight and Batman Begins. Harry Potter, The Hobbit, Hunger Games, even Shrek, these franchises generally demand you keep up with the movies. Now obviously you can skip around, but I'm talking a numbers game. How many people can you get to turn out? Sure, you'll get plenty of people to go see the final movie of a big blockbuster franchise, even if they've never seen any of the prior films, just because it's something to do. It's an action-packed time at the movies. But you get way more people the more you can reel in the casual audience and get them invested watching the earlier films beforehand. And that's the magic of Marvel movies. It's that you don't have to watch all the Marvel movies. This is absolute gold for capturing a casual audience. Prior to their big crossover events like Civil War, Endgame, and so on, Marvel has a lot of options available, and none are truly contingent on the other. The casual viewer could see a trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and be like, not my speed, and skip it. But then sometime later see a trailer for Ant-Man and give it a try just because they have nothing to do that weekend and they like Paul Rudd. And guess what? Nothing is lost. And before you jump in and say, well, what about James Bond? What about Fast and the Furious? What about Transformers? Aren't there lots of franchises where you can skip movies and it doesn't matter? Well, yes, but then what you're missing out on is build-up. The final Harry Potter film broke the box office because there was a big build-up over multiple films, whereas there's no real reason the next James Bond will do that much better than the last. Marvel has hit the sweet spot where not only can you skip around, not only can you exclusively watch the genres and actors that appeal to you without missing anything super important, there is still enough soft, overarching plot buildup in each individual movie that even if you only watch a couple here or there, you may now be just invested enough to watch that big crossover event whenever that happens next. And the best part is you can still skip other movies that happen in between if you don't feel like it. So you're not punishing casual audiences for not watching every film in the franchise. You're just getting them interested enough to see the big event when it happens. Now on the flip side, while no one is punished for skipping around, you do get bonus enjoyment for watching as many of the movies as possible. Iron Man 2 and Thor are totally unrelated plots, but the incident regarding Thor's hammer is ongoing during Iron Man 2. So for viewers that do watch both, there is added excitement to the idea of seeing these two plots colliding in the inevitable crossover. So yet another reason it's the perfect franchise model. Viewers can just watch whatever appeals to them if they so choose, but they are also softly incentivized to watch as many movies as possible to get all the references, all the details, basically the full immersion of the universe, creating a franchise with a strong hardcore audience who will watch everything, as well as a gigantic casual audience who can just get in on the hype whenever they feel like it. Now, however, all that freedom doesn't mean anything if not for the fact that Marvel is extraordinarily consistent. When it comes to film franchises, consistency matters more than quality. It is way better for long-term success to put out 3 solid movies than 1 great movie, 1 okay movie, and 1 terrible movie. Why? Because the consumer is never let down. If you put out a great movie and then a terrible sequel, the viewer loses faith in the franchise. X-Men had some great installments, but there's very few people that actually look forward to more movies in that franchise at this point because it's just so up and down. You never know what you get when you're revisiting that universe, so it's really hard to look forward to future films. This is just a basic rule of product development that goes far beyond film. People want consistency in their brand. They want consistency in what they're paying for, and Marvel has that down to a T, both in terms of quality and tone. They have a very tight formula they stick to for their movies, to the point that early on, each origin story Marvel was putting out was essentially a carbon copy. They all featured 3 major action beats, the first showcasing the hero's powers, the second being a messier struggle, the third being a huge action set piece. They all featured villains that had basically the same power as the hero, just being used for evil, and most importantly, they all made sure to never take themselves too seriously, jokes, keep it light, keep it simple, rather than trying to wow viewers and risk either setting expectations too high for the future, or just failing and falling flat completely. Marvel realized it's better to make the viewer feel they had a decent, if not necessarily exceptional time at the movies, and just plant some small degree of interest in that bigger, far more exciting event to come. This plays back into freedom. Yes, you have this wide variety of movies to pick from. Maybe 2 out of 3 trailers are boring to you, but for that third movie you do decide to watch, you know what you're getting. Everyone at this point knows what a Marvel movie feels like. There's this sort of brand guarantee of at least semi-enjoyable at worst, and maybe a really fun time at best. So that brand safety net it has constructed is what makes this wide freedom of choice work. And finally, the right thread. I've been mentioning repeatedly that each movie still does something for the overarching plot. They kind of have to, as the final goal is to get everyone to see that big Avengers crossover when the time comes. But across 21 movies, how do you make a plotline that is continually building, that casual viewers won't lose track of even if they skip a lot of the movies? Well, Marvel nailed it again with the Infinity Stones. It's so simple, yet exactly what makes a huge project like this work. You've heard of MacGuffins, well here's 6, spread across a bunch of movies, and you don't even really have to keep track of them that much, you just keep being shown them and reminded of them, and that they're important, and that they're slowly coming together, and they're even different colors so you don't get them mixed up much. And that's all you really need to know. It's the simplest thread imaginable. You can watch like a quarter of the movies and easily pick up on the fact that the connecting thread is the stones. And so when it's time for everything to come together, you can easily understand that one bad guy gathering all these stones together is a big f***ing deal, and you understand why the heroes have to stop him. So yeah, you pretty much know everything that's going on and feel actually somewhat invested even if you skipped a lot of the details along the way. So altogether, why is Marvel king today? It builds a larger narrative to get hooked on, while still giving viewers freedom to be as invested in it as they want, promising absolutely consistent quality no matter what you choose to watch, and gives you a nice, easy connecting thread, so you can follow along no matter how much or how little you care about the overarching story. So then why do I say that Marvel's days at the top are numbered? Well, first there's Marvel's own decisions, and second is what's happening with the competition. Let's start with Marvel itself. I think Marvel will probably be able to keep up its consistent movie-to-movie quality for a while, because it just sticks to the book so tightly and never strays. But where I think it's about to potentially start losing ground in public interest is in terms of freedom and the connecting thread. When I look at Marvel's upcoming movie lineup, we see a lot more experimental ideas and a lot more crossovers. Many of these films will heavily feature multiple superheroes. So rather than characters mostly staying in their lane except for cameos here and there leading up to the big crossover, now it looks like crossovers will be the norm, which might seem like Marvel taking advantage of the large universe it now has, but at the same time, anyone who vaguely follows comics knows how much messier things get as storylines and character plots get more and more entangled. Not to mention, if you vaguely follow comics, you also know how much of a headache multiple universes, alternate realities, splitting timelines, and so on become. And that feels like the direction we may be headed, with Spider-Man already broaching the subject of crossing universes, and future titles like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and Ant-Man Quantumania, not to mention we've already started messing with time travel and changing the past with Avengers Endgame. And the tricky part is that the allure of concepts like time travel or meeting alternate reality Spider-Man definitely is really cool at first. It's what these initial forays spiral into down the line that makes things often overly complicated in terms of continuity. The biggest thing Marvel has going for it, which is that it is the perfect franchise to dip in and out of as a casual viewer, may not be the case by the end of Phase 4 of their lineup. You could say that this studio is smart and successful enough that they know what they're doing, and that's definitely possible. But at the same time, if the comics that they are drawing on are notorious for inevitably becoming too bloated and overly complicated over time, then I'm not certain the studio won't fall prey to the same pitfalls with the direction it's going. Not to mention the other key piece that may be missing from Marvel's formula going forward, an easy-to-follow plot thread like the Infinity Stones. I'm sure Marvel has its next major Avengers crossover climactic event plotted out, but it cannot be stressed enough how important the Infinity Stones were to keeping a very simple, very unobtrusive running plotline going throughout the previous films leading up to Endgame. They were the perfect plot thread to hold the hand of the casual viewer. But if Marvel now wants to set up another major event, what simple device, what concept, what thread is it going to run across Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, the Fantastic Four, and so on, that is so easy to consistently plant that any casual fan can follow the overarching plot that is developing without making this thread so obtrusive that it turns Marvel into just another film series where you have to actually watch all the movies in order to keep track of the plot, because that is when it loses its biggest advantage. Not to mention, not only are we about to get a lot more experimental and a lot more complicated, potentially without some simple thread to follow like the Infinity Stones, a lot of this is basically being built up from scratch. We just ended that 20-film-long Infinity Stones storyline, so for a lot of casual fans, the big payoff already happened. Marvel lovers will obviously stick with the series, but Marvel has to draw casuals back into a new story, which is not only harder to do with their new approach, they have to do it without the main character that was the one true star of the franchise up till now. No matter how many other superheroes they threw at the wall, Marvel has to know that Iron Man was the heart of their franchise. And not only are they missing their main character, they're also missing their second main character. And of the two most popular characters of their new wave of heroes, unfortunately we've lost Chadwick Boseman as well. I'm sure the new Spider-Man will be a tremendous success, but I'm definitely skeptical of how things go from there. Now you might be saying, okay, well Morge, all of that doesn't really mean Marvel's going downhill, just that their strategy may be a little murkier going forward. And that's where the competition comes in. Everyone now knows that the cinematic universe model is the way to go if you want a long-running franchise. So the freedom aspect of Marvel's franchise is being copied already. And you might be saying, well, but it's not that easy to replicate, look how DC screwed it up. Here's the thing, just because some studios messed it up at first, doesn't mean it's going to be that way for long. The developing universe with Kong and Godzilla is starting to work. Star Wars ended its god-awful trilogy, but has had plenty of well-received side endeavors, and is honestly probably only 3 to 4 years away from getting a very competitive cinematic universe up and running, with a name brand that is just as big as Marvel's behind it. DC, as much as you can make fun of them for their missteps, has already kind of started to turn it around. DC films are no longer a joke and people actually like them, and God knows how long before we start seeing things like a John Wick cinematic universe, because the reality is we are quickly approaching an era where cinematic universes are going to be the norm for franchises, which means Marvel will no longer have a monopoly on huge crossover events. looking at Marvel's formula, other studios have already started recreating this aspect. We see studios getting closer to being consistently decent, and if they start figuring out this piece, then suddenly everyone's all caught up. And in fact, at that point when everyone is caught up on the same franchise model, Marvel may be the one suffering from oversaturation of the superhero genre, similar to how the young adult fiction wave that reigned for a decade gradually died, in which case other non-superhero cinematic universes will start to get ahead. Again, I don't expect Marvel to be dethroned this year or even next year, but I do know history, and these things change much faster than you'd expect. There was a time not long ago when Marvel was notoriously terrible at movies and DC was the gold standard. The blockbuster landscape 5 years from now will likely look very different than what it is today. So if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this every Saturday.